November was extraordinarily busy this year, wasn't it? With the eagerly anticipated launch of Super Mario Odyssey, Wolfenstein the New Colossus, Assassin's Creed Origins, and the new Breville Sandwich Maker edition of Skyrim, it's safe to say that a lot of new releases got buried in that AAA avalanche. One such title was Superflight, a small, quiet release that I wouldn't even be aware of were it not for a brief glimpse of the game in action from a friend's Twitter feed. For less than the price of a coffee, there was little to lose, and so I picked it up and gave it a whirl. And let me tell you something, this game is pretty damn good. Grizzly Games' addictive minimalist flight sim is a remarkably straightforward game, one that follows that age-old mantra of easy to pick up, difficult to master. A simple premise: your avatar is clad in a wingsuit and you are falling from the sky. Laid out in front of you are a series of complex, procedurally generated landscapes, and you have only one goal: don't crash. What's remarkable about Superflight is how much it does with this solitary premise. This is a minimalist experience, stripped back and refined around this core idea, the only gamey aspect being a point system that's designed to push the player towards risky play. As the developers state clearly on their website, this game doesn't have helicopters, online leaderboards, guns, a leveling system, a soundtrack, loot boxes, a cinematic story, online multiplayer, Twitch live integration, character skins, or orcs. There is no narrative drive, no antagonist, no castles to storm or kidnapped monarchs to rescue, no lands to conquer or lives to extinguish. Just you and your wingsuit, facing off against the forces of gravity. At face value, this is a game about avoiding obstacles. But within this deceptively simple interaction, a dozen or so things are going on. You're making split-second decisions about pathways. You are weighing up the cost analysis of aiming for that slightly smaller gap for a bigger point bonus. You are calculating the timing and momentum of falling between pillars and aiming for the portal to a new alien realm. And sometimes you're taking an almost literal leap of faith, funneling yourself into a blind spot that could just as easily lead to disaster as it could triumph. And nothing I have played this year has matched the feeling of hellish relief that came from a cheeky gamble paying off in the most spectacular way. This minimalism is the key to the game's success. So much so that I can't think of a single addition that wouldn't diminish the overall experience. There is a way to prove this too. It turns out Superflight soared into my cone of vision at the perfect time, as I've been dabbling with another wingsuit heavy title, Just Cause 3. This third entry in the explosive open world sandbox franchise has movement as its poster child. The brilliant hookshot parachute combo from the previous entry is bolstered by a new wingsuit that allows walking 80s action hero cliche Rico Rodriguez to boomerang around the map at a rate of knots. Of course, it's not as easy as all that. Movement is based on a specific set of physical parameters, and it takes a while to get used to the limits of these three elements and how they interact. Just Cause 3's modus operandi quickly becomes mastery of these core mechanics, building almost everything else around them. Only, the fact that the movement in this game is so good ends up highlighting how the rest of the game isn't. Quite a lot of what you end up doing in Just Cause 3 is honestly quite average. Shooting feels limp and weightless. Vehicles are sluggish and basically redundant for most of the game. The explosions are an impressive sight, but they never feel all that threatening. There's also that other big selling point, the grappling hook that allows you to attach items to one another, and then have them violently collide or slingshot across the map, flinging gas canisters into buildings and tying helicopters together Three Stooges style. While initially a great deal of fun, it quickly runs out of steam, and the clumsy complexity of the control scheme means that there is this hardy barrier to entry for what the game is really capable of. Those incredibly badass heroics featured heavily in the game's promo material. The game world is gorgeous though. Avalanche Studios have always had a good track record with that, which helps given how expansive it is and how much time you spend travelling from A to B. And the game is fun. A clear example of building structures around systems and not the other way round. But nothing in the game feels as good as mastering the wingsuit. You get a very tangible rush of adrenaline when Rico's belly barely grazes the ground, teasing collision but ascending at that final moment, met with a mixture of relief and excitement. You get a sense of power and dominion over the land as you hookshot into parachute into wingsuit, chased by explosions, the air singing with bullets and missiles. While considerably lower fidelity, I'd argue that Superflight gives just as good using far, far less. Based on very similar principles of creating a power fantasy through systems mastery rather than join the dots busywork, Superflight's stripped back design and minimal control scheme allow players to grasp what makes the game shine far quicker than its sun-soaked AAA comrade. With no targets or goals in sight, you're never tripped up or stalled seeking out scene fillers or locating mission markers, and thanks to the minimal complexity and low fidelity of the environments, the game is able to reset your progress instantly upon collision. Failure becomes little more than a fleck of annoyance, rather than a sustained pang of frustration. You're thrown right back into the action in a split second, no lengthy load times to sit through, one of Just Cause 3's inevitable but biggest bugbears. Adding to this is the fact that, with no completion goals, map seed generation and subsequent traversal is at your pleasure, not the game's. You can take your time and master a particular world, get to know its peaks and crevices intimately, or you can be a pilgrim in an unholy land on repeat, dipping a toe across the multiverse with incredible ease. There's always something familiar, and always something new. In a way, what makes both games feel wonderful to helm boils down to a single, incredible prototype. And for Just Cause in particular, the window dressing surrounding this prototype adds little, but demands a lot. Before you start, I know this is a false equivalent. These are titles of differing size, ambition, and target demographic. One is a commercial version of a university project, while the other a sequel to an established AAA franchise. Differing design philosophies and aesthetics, and really the only thing to connect the dots is a wingsuit, which is not unique to these two games. There are moments to be found in Superflight that simply don't translate. Couldn't translate. And your time with Rico and his ludicrous arsenal gifts experiences that complement its accented core. Big, bombastic 80s action movie set pieces, stunning visuals, a wealth of unlockable abilities. All those tick boxes that many sniff at, but are actually quite a welcome sight for some. The point of this exercise is not to fart on one project over another. I'm not one for leading the cheer for involuntary underdogs, and I certainly don't want the hard work of bigger studios to go unnoticed and unappreciated. And honestly, I'm having enough fun with Just Cause 3's tripartite movement mechanics that I've been able to ignore those elements I'm less keen on. Big games can learn from small ones. This sort of ex nihilo adjacent design philosophy, creating a lot from so very little, can go a long way to making everyone's core experiences better. The idiom "too many cooks spoil the broth" is contingent on what you value out of interactive media. However, there is always that kernel of truth stuck in there somewhere. Simplicity is the key to ascension. Games like Superflight help us to understand how we can get more out than we put in, crafting experiences comparable to gaming's big boys at a fraction of the cost. It teaches us that there is a resplendent joy to be found in the act of play, and how important it is to teach the player to just enjoy the moment to moment.
Rebels are in peril. They'll be overrun, crushed by opposing ground units. It's tragic, yet exciting. Not exciting. Not as an attack exciting. I misspoke. This is an exciting chance to test my newest invention.
What's that?
Also to avert disaster. Put out your hands. Like so.
What are you doing, woman? Huh? Ow!
Done. You now have wingsuit. Handy for gliding.